it really does mean interrogating the role that technology plays in our lives in the first place. And I think that builds off of principles like accountability, trustworthiness, and transparency.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Natasha Tiku. I'm a tech culture reporter with the Washington Post, and I'm joined here by Sneha Revanur, who is the founder and president of Encode Justice. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Natasha. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's start with just talking a little bit about young people and their adoption of this technology. What have you been seeing, like among your peers at school with generative AI and ChatGPT?
Yeah, it's been astonishing. I mean, I've been working in this AI space for around 3 years, so obviously not nearly as long as some of the titans we see today, but still long enough to really notice and feel the impacts of this dramatic shift in how my generation is thinking about and using AI. I mean, all within the last year. People have gone from probably not thinking about it very much at all to AI now having a name and a face and really showing up in everyday conversations. I recall the first time my friend told me that she had used ChatGPT to write a text to a guy who had ghosted her. And I think my reaction probably caught her off guard, because I was like, oh my God, I have been waiting for this. You have no idea how much this excites me to hear these words even being uttered outside the bubble. And that was probably not the reaction she was expecting, but nonetheless, it was so exciting and encouraging. And I mean, we've gone from probably last year, my friends and peers would have been like, oh, this is Sneha, she does this AI thing, I couldn't really tell you what it is, she just like skips class and goes to DC sometimes. And now people are actually walking up to me on campus and they're asking questions and they're expressing genuine concern about just how far-reaching AI has become in our daily lives. And to me, that is so encouraging. I mean, my peers are wondering whether AI is surveilling us, whether AI is going to render their dream job obsolete, how social media algorithms are impacting their mental well-being, whether they're encountering deepfakes, whether there could be an AI catastrophe, and obviously just how creepy Snapchat's My AI feature was earlier this year. I mean, that was crazy. So I think that it's awesome to see that people are beginning to pay attention, and I think that is the launching pad for meaningful public discourse.
And how quickly have you seen like people's behaviors, like using ChatGPT to text a guy who ghosted you? How are people adapting to the everyday uses of it? Like, does it feel, I guess, suffused in your like daily life?
Yeah, I think it definitely has been a slow shift, but I think it's for sure taking place. I think the first time that I really heard people talk about it was probably late last year, in November and December, when I think the initial hype and hysteria around ChatGPT was taking off. And I think that at this point, it's become a fixture of almost everyday conversation, which has been crazy to me. I know, for example, we've seen how a word like Google has become, a dictionary word, and we've seen that become used as a verb. And I think now we're seeing ChatGPT enter everyday speech to almost a similar degree. And I think, yeah, it definitely has been something that has taken place over the last year and has been ramping up. But I think now it's really playing a critical role in our lives, and that's been astonishing. I mean, people are obviously using it, in the ways that I described to, write breakup texts and, confront guys, and, all sorts of things. But I think people are also using it for meaningful academic uses. People are, using it to boost productivity. People are using it to actually learn and to engage with new content. There are positive uses. There are also risks, of course. We have encountered the issue of hallucinations, as they've called it, from ChatGPT, and the risk of disinformation. And of course, who knows the impact that generative AI could have on the workforce, whether, like I mentioned before, it could render some of our dream jobs entirely obsolete. So there's a whole host of challenges resulting from this, but I think people are finally becoming a bit cognizant of it.
And can you talk to us a little bit more about Encode Justice, why you founded it, and how the organization has transformed over the past few years?
Yeah, of course. I mean, things have obviously just taken off in the AI world as a whole over the last couple of years, but actually, when I was in high school, I came across an investigation conducted by ProPublica that uncovered pretty staggering rates of racial bias in an algorithm that was being used to determine whether or not a defendant should be released or detained before their trial. And that the machine bias expose is now treated as a seminal expose, kind of exposing algorithmic bias, and a lot of people view that as an entry point into the space. And actually, a couple of years after that, in 2020, I came across a ballot measure in my home state of California that sought to enshrine the use of very similar software statewide in place of the already flawed system of cash bail. And analysts actually thought that the measure was almost guaranteed to pass because it was backed by the political establishment in California and the billionaire developers of courtroom algorithms, and that's how I knew that I wanted to get involved. And so I rallied my peers, and together we hosted town halls, created informational content, called voters, and really tried to get the word out about the fact that these algorithms could actually be dangerous. And I think that we actually were able to make a big splash and ended up defeating the measure by around a 13% margin. And that was actually just the first initiative, and at that point we became this larger organization, Encode Justice, and now we're a global movement of around 900 high school and college students working to imagine a human-centered AI future. And I think that, like I mentioned before, a lot of that interest has been a product of the changing times. There's been a lot more interest in AI over the last year, but nonetheless, it's been so heartening, I think, to see how many more young people are beginning to pay attention and want to get involved.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about well, first of all, Sneha and I met, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, and the amount that she has accomplished in the past 6 months, if you didn't know her before, you will see her again and again. And when you and I talked, you guys were still really focused on facial recognition and a lot of these inequalities that members of Encode Justice had experienced at their own school, and now the conversation has been dominated by generative AI. How are you navigating those two competing policy goals that you're very interested in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that there, as you mentioned, has really been a dramatic shift over the last year, and that has led to a shift in my outlook as well. I think that what stands out to me is that we're seeing a lot of infighting right now in the AI community in terms of where exactly energy and resources should be allocated. We have people who want to focus solely on confronting short-term immediate risks, and that's obviously critical work because we're seeing algorithmic bias, we're seeing disinformation, we are seeing discrimination, surveillance, all of these challenges that we're face to face with already. And then we're seeing people who would rather focus on catastrophic risks and potential threats posed by AI that maybe we haven't actually seen yet or that haven't been fully realized yet. And the issue is that people are viewing these two priorities as competing. People have this zero-sum view of AI governance that I frankly don't think needs to exist, because in reality, we can and should act to both confront the harms that we're already face-to-face with today and to anticipate the threats of tomorrow that we may not see yet, but that could be possibly devastating. And actually, this summit is fantastically timed, or maybe our statement was fantastically timed, because we released a statement actually just yesterday with the Future of Life Institute, which obviously is a nonprofit focusing almost exclusively on the catastrophic potential of AI. And we called for the policy solution of creating an AI licensing regime and pretty vocally rejected this false choice between immediate threats and future harms. And so I think that it's really, really important now more than ever, since we have lawmakers looking to experts as kind of a North Star to guide policy discussions around AI. We're seeing, for example, Majority Leader Schumer, who was just speaking here earlier today, convening this set of expert insight forums to gather input and to guide the path forward. Now more than ever, they're looking to experts in search of coherent messaging. And I think that my fear right now is that if we just devolve into infighting, if we just devolve into factions, then none of us are going to get what we want at all. And that's going to result in a scenario where we have to pay the steep cost of inaction, and we're both unable to confront existing harms, and we could be on the brink of even more catastrophic ones. And so I think that my call to action right now, and I think this applies both to lawmakers and to those those in the AI communities to really end that infighting. And I think that that's a perspective that we've adopted as well, in terms of we see ourselves as being capable of focusing on both sets of priorities.
And could you talk a little bit about, just the importance of young people having a voice in this legislation? I mean, we're seeing, now recent efforts to talk about kids and social media. It's been around for 15,
Absolutely.
almost 20 years. Can you talk a little bit about, just how strongly your members feel about this and what they want to, the message to lawmakers, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it is so, so important, Natasha. I mean, there is no generation before ours that truly understand what it's like to grow up in a world where the information that we're exposed to, the perspectives that we're consuming, to an extent, even our self-concept is almost algorithmically curated because of the extent to which we've engaged with social media platforms. It truly has impacted, every aspect of our existence, and we've grown up in that reality as opposed to generations before us that, had that introduced them at a much later point in their lives. And so because of that, I think we have this unique perspective and we have this credential of lived experience that I think is so, so, so valuable in these conversations about AI regulation. And so even though a lot of us are, sometimes off-put by the amount of technical jargon and complexity relating to AI, in the past, we tended to view AI as this abstract phenomenon that was just beyond comprehension, something dawning upon us in the distant future, but, not actually present in the here and now. I think it's really important that we shed that view and that we get involved in these conversations, because we need meaningful democratic control of AI to really steer it in the right direction. We need broad public participation, and it's my generation of digital natives that needs to really take up the mantle and join those conversations and join those efforts. And so I think that lawmakers should be willing to hear from us, again, given that lived experience that we have, but also my generation, my peers should be willing to, I think, look past sometimes, I think, how intimidating these conversations can be and realize that they are just as entitled to a place in the conversation as any academic or any PhD or any, congressional veteran.
Right. We just have time for one last question, and I'd love to hear about, growing an organization to 900 people is a phenomenal achievement. And could you talk a little bit about what, as you've seen more young people get engaged, what has been the catalyst for their engagement, for getting over the hump of the technical jargon and maybe feeling like you don't have a voice, you're too young to be part of a policy conversation? How are you seeing people come to the organization?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple of ways in which we've been able to make that take place. I think the first one is, again, really highlighting that AI is already influencing daily life and that it's not this distant phenomenon that people can't even begin to conceive of. I mean, I always bring up this example and I use this to illustrate just how impactful AI is, but let's say that you're applying for a job, there could be an algorithm that is determining what jobs you are even shown in the first place and which jobs you're even applying to. And there could also be an algorithm that once you actually apply is reviewing your resume. And we obviously have seen some instances of algorithmic bias and systems that have been deployed by leading companies in making those decisions. At the same time, let's say that you are standing trial, there could be an algorithm that is evaluating you and your criminal risk that you are posing as a defendant. Let's say you're moving around in a public space, there are facial recognition cameras that could be monitoring your movements and that could be used to track down your identity. It really is impacting us on every level, and it's to an extent where it's now inescapable. And of course, as we're also grappling with these conversations around larger scale catastrophic risk, I mean, really none of us are able to be exempt from the harms of AI. It's really going to deeply impact what our shared future could look like. And so I think that because we've been able to make that claim, because we've, I think, also been able to use these conversations around generative AI as an entry point to bring more and more folks into the fold, I think that for the first time, young people are beginning to see this as an issue that is both proximate to their lived reality and also more and more accessible, because we are trying to make those connections crystal clear between AI that we're hearing about in an abstract sense and AI that's actually being used in the real world. So I think that's been really, really valuable. And also, of course, I think that there are so many ways to get involved. I mean, we have youth who have backgrounds in computer science and who are learning learning coding and have that technical credential, and they come at this issue with that perspective because they want to, for example, head into the tech force and become developers themselves who are a lot more socially conscious and who are thinking a lot more about how to build responsible technology. And then we also have youth who have backgrounds in advocacy and who have worked on adjacent issues, or who have worked in climate activism, or worked in gun violence prevention or similar issues where we've seen a lot of youth engagement. And now they're looking at this and they're like, this could be the next great challenge of our time, and this could be the next great challenge that young people are really being called on to take part in. And so I think that because it's an issue where people from so many different backgrounds and vantage points can really get involved, whether that's, again, people who have a background in computer science, or people who have a background in policy and advocacy, or people who are creatively minded and want to help us, reshape public narratives around AI, there's really a place for everyone to get involved and for everyone to apply their unique skills. And I think that's really what's brought so many youth into the conversation. So yes, very, very encouraging stuff.
Well, I think that's a great place to end it. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sneha.
Thank you so much, Natasha.
Yeah. Stay tuned. Our next guest will be out here shortly.